60 of you all here. So we're going to go ahead and get started because this is going to, I, I'm Jordan, first of all, the director of Grassroots Partnerships at the Jewish Liberation Fund. I'm responsible for a lot of our grant making process, a lot of the design, some of the definitions, et cetera, and a lot of different kind of stuff that you're going to be learning about today. This is going to definitely be a whirlwind. I just want to start with that. There will be time for questions at the end, so go ahead and if you have questions that are sort of like just stewing, feel free to message them to Jessica, JLF assistant, who you'll see there. Someone ran track against me. Wow, you definitely stay on afterwards. That's very exciting. Uh, but definitely stay on afterwards. I'll do my best. If you have questions, feel free to throw questions in the chat that are relevant to whatever we're talking about. I'll do my best to actually answer them live if they're relevant, and if they're bigger questions or things that I don't know, we'll be able to follow up later. But this is going to be a whirlwind. We're going to have a ton of information. It's going to be a lot of reading off slides, giving some context, but this should be a pretty comprehensive review of just about everything that you could expect from our grant making process. So really excited to get started in talking about this. But really quickly, who's excited? Who's excited to learn about the JLF grant making process? Yes, 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 we are so excited. Yes. Oh, I love all these emojis coming. Yes. Okay, without further ado, here's what we're going to get into today. Well, first I'm going to move this little thing that's in my way, the Zoom thing. So we're going to introduce the JLF Grants team, which one person actually had a flight get delayed, and so they're going to be missing. Yes, there will be a recording. It will be posted online afterwards and sent to our emails. We're going to introduce our grants team. We're then going to get into if a JLF grant is a good fit for you, which means sort of like basic eligibility stuff, what we do and don't fund in terms of types of work, and then grant sizes, the grant or grant tracks, which will also have information on the sizes, term, and expectations. Those of you who've been following our grant making process for a few years know there's a lot of new information in there. So we'll definitely do our best to explain them. And honestly, please be very forthcoming with questions on those because this is our first year beginning to incorporate grant tracks. This is going to be, the feedback is going to be really important for us being able to, think about how to make everything as clear as possible going forward. So then we're going to go into the LOIs and the grant making process, what to expect there. And, for the overall process, this will be more heavily focused on the LOI segment because you'll have opportunities to meet with our program officers later if you are invited to submit a full proposal, which that'll include our funding priorities and criteria. Again, please pay attention on those if you've been involved with our process. Um, those are going to be there are going to be a few changes from last year on that. Um, it's slight, but still important. We'll go through the whole process, how they're evaluated, what it looks like for the full proposals, and then sort of just an overview of the role of the staff steering committee and our community grant making team. And then we'll give some brief tips for a successful proposal, a little bit of an overview of our grant making portal, which has been improved this year, and then time for questions and answers. Without further ado, unless someone has a question about that exactly that I need to answer right now, then we're going to go ahead and get started. So first, we're going to quickly introduce our grants team. We're going to go ahead and spotlight Karen real quick. Hey Karen, you can spotlight me too. Make sure we both appear
Hi.
together.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with all of you. There are so many familiar faces and also so many of you who I haven't had a chance to meet yet. Really excited to get to know you. My name is Karen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the new co-executive director at JLF and also the director at Rise Up until we merge with JLF this summer. And I'm going to be part of the grants team. Really excited to get to work with all of you.
And so Karen, along with myself and one other person, Deidre Reiser, who is unable to be with us because of some flight issues, are going to be your program officers. We're the people who you'll be interfacing with, the people who are responding to questions on about or on our LOI form about your proposal, meeting with you throughout the process. So these are some familiar faces. Hopefully, they're going to be friendly faces. And we're all really excited to work with the many of you who are ready to apply this year. All right, thank you. So we'll go ahead and get the slideshow back up. So we're jumping in with our baseline eligibility criteria. Our work is to nourish the progressive Jewish movement for justice and liberation. as such, for organizations who are applying to receive JLF funding, we want to make sure that they're part of that movement. So our criteria for that are one, work that's progressive, two, work that's primarily focused on cultivating Jewish involvement in movements for justice and liberation, and three, work that addresses systemic causes of oppression. So there is a lot of other important work, mutual aid, etc., that don't involve like a power building or like systemic component. That's not the work we fund. We'll get little bit more into that later. So how do you define all of these things, you might ask? Well, we have definitions for all of them. So for work that's progressive, we want an organization to be progressive in its vision, strategies, programs, and practices, which must inherit and honor the inherent human dignity and value of all people. Orgs that satisfies criteria must be reflective of and grounded in a political understanding of the structural oppression shapes of society and recognize the need to build collective power to transform this reality. And also be explicitly and publicly committed to advancing cultural and systemic change in service of expanded social, racial, environmental, disability, gender, and economic justice, or be building a spiritual, cultural, and political home for people who are under-resourced and structurally marginalized within Jewish communities. So as long as you are grounded in that political understanding and satisfy one of those other two criteria, then you're able to satisfy this baseline criteria. One thing that is important is we don't fund work that is just led by progressive Jews and or learning that the work itself is not progressive. So, sometimes we'll get a we might get a proposal from an organization who is, hey, we're really progressive Jews and we just do Torah study and there's not like a really clear and public commitment to like the angle to that being progressive by this definition. And that's not work that we would fund. That said, I think most of the applicants, this is one of the criteria that we expect most of our applicants to be able to address. Next, work that's primarily focused on cultivating Jewish involvement in movements for justice and liberation. Uh, I'm not going to actually read this entire list of eligible work, but these are, it's a pretty broad spectrum of work that can do that. But because our focus as a funder is to fund the progressive Jewish movement, we really want to make sure that work that we fund is like connected to that movement particularly, like intentionally, and like truly organizing Jews, having impact on Jews, things like that. Organizations doing progressive work and incidentally led by Jews don't qualify for this criteria. That's really sort of the important part. There are organizations who are like, hey, we just happen to be Jews doing tenants' rights organizing, and like that is important work, and we care that that work happens. But with our limited resources in terms of our mission to grow the capital conditions and culture that the Jewish left needs to win, we are focused on funding the Jewish left. And finally, work that addresses systemic causes of oppression. Um, that includes inspiring personal and individual change, spiritual nourishment, grounded in liberatory values, community power building, organizing, issue campaigns, and/or direct action, working within mainstream institutions to shift them in a progressive direction, creating progressive alternatives to mainstream institutions, just like this very one that you're applying for funding from. Thought leadership, civic education analysis, and other narrative creation and leadership development and skill building for movement leaders. Again, it's a pretty broad definition. The important thing here that we're looking for is making sure there is some amount of like, sort of like I mentioned that mission, like growing capital culture conditions, something that is building the power of the Jewish left, not just addressing, band-aid fixes to societal issues. Again, we think that work is really important. With our limited resources, this is what we have chosen to fund. And if you're not sure if you fit these criteria, especially if you are a working class, support-led project and/or project led by and/or serving Jews of color, Sephardim, and Mizrahim, you're encouraged to connect directly with JLF staff to discuss further. Don't exclude yourself out of uncertainty. Feel free to shoot us an email. Honestly, you can go ahead and throw in an LOI, but definitely just like shoot us an email, something in the LOI question. Um, I'm realizing that I should have put the email of grants at jewishliberationfund. I didn't tell Jessica to put that in the chat, but Jessica, I'm going to ask you to put that in the chat now. Just grants at jewishliberationfund. If you have questions about whether you should apply or anyone else you want to just like tell us to reach out to, feel free to put that there. We'll get into where to put questions on your LOI later. And as far as the types of work we fund, we take a movement ecosystem approach to funding across strategies, issues, and regions. Um, as you can tell from this list, we fund a number of different things: local organizing, spiritual communities, leadership development, arts and culture, JOC, community, culture, etc., and movement infrastructure. And across a lot of different locations. We have grantees in the Pacific Northwest. We have grantees in the Midwest. We have grantees in the South. We have grantees in the Northeast. And that's one of our priorities is to make sure that we're nourishing the movement, not just in one very specific locale, not just we're not just funding only direct action or something like that. Really making sure we do our best to make sure all these different sorts of strategies, areas, etc., are nourished. One thing that's important to note, all organizations must have 501(c)(3) status or be fiscally sponsored projects of 501(c)(3) organizations and have significant domestic US-based components to their work. We fund, currently our priority is to fund work that's based in the United States. That's at least in large part because that's where we currently have the knowledge for a community grant making process. Um, that doesn't mean that if you do work right like you can look at our grantee history, right? Organizations like Center for Jewish Nonviolence, Afar Mim, have international components to their work, but they're building the power of the US based Jewish left with the work that they're doing. And so thinking about making sure that the work, if your work is not building the power of the US based Jewish left in some capacity, then you will not be eligible to apply. Also, if you don't know what fiscal sponsorship is, that is something where if you currently don't have a 501(c)(3), a lot of people who are applying as artists, for example, might fall into that category. A lot of smaller organizations or smaller initiatives might not know that. Larger organizations can you basically make an agreement and they'll take in the funds as the 501(c)(3) fiscal sponsoring organization. And essentially, you have a contract with them and they manage the funds, but those funds must be dedicated towards your project. That's something that a lot of our grantees have. JLF is also a fiscally sponsored project of a much larger fund, Proteus Fund. If you have questions about that, email that email that Jessica put in the chat, the grants at jewishliberation.fund. Let's see, making sure. Okay, great, great. I was making sure I didn't miss any chats there. Um, Okay, moving on. Just more specifically, once again, work we do not fund direct service without a power building component, Jewish education without a social justice lens and power building component, we must have both. Social justice work that is not particularly Jewish but happens to be led by one or more Jews, internal DEIJ work within predominantly white institutions, and or projects with an exclusively or predominantly international focus and scope for their work. Sort of reiterating that, but we want to be really clear about that in terms of the number of people who apply. So grant tracks. This is new in 2026. We have 4 grant tracks that you can apply on. To pull back the curtain a little bit as far as why we decided to do this, one of the things that we've sort of been weighing is from the time JLF was started, one of the intentions we have always had is how do we make sure we're always making grants that are impactful for the organizations who receive them. And as we had more and more applications, anyone who's been part of our community grant making team or steering committee can tell you this. It became harder and harder to sort of keep that priority as we had more and more applicants and more people we had to, say no to. Um, the way we developed these tracks, we sort of began in a process with our steering committee, started talking about what we want, like what the moment we're in, what we want JLF to be, what we want our movement to be able to accomplish, and what we want JLF to be able to accomplish for our movement. And in sort of thinking about the different types of work that we fund, uh, how some funding might be able to sustain, transform, and make more possible with their work. Um, we sort of said this is what we're going to do these are the kind of grants that we need to be able to make that possible. Um, so as you see, we have grants for courageous action, community leadership, and connecting the movement. Um, I guess we'll get into specific definitions later. Grants for individual artists with fiscal sponsorship, seed grants, and launchpad grants. And I actually am going to do a brief overview of each of these now, and the more specific definition will be later. Um, the first one, relatively, the CCC grants, as we'll call them, are relatively straightforward. Really important things that we see in our movement that we want to continue to be supporting are courageous action, um, community leadership, and like connecting, building leadership, etc. within our movement. Um, for individual artists, we want to make sure we're funding people who are able to help us create, feel, live into, imagine the, Olam Haba, the world to come, the world we'd like to, the world we believe we can make possible with our movement's work. With seed grants, we want to make sure we're funding work that is experimental or just like fills needs that are, small work that fills um, needs, maybe has the potential to grow, but can see the needs in our community and in our movement and responds to them. And then launchpad grants, which are invitation only, which are for organizations who are sort of, hopefully preparing to take a step in terms of their sustainability. So we're going to get into these grant types. Grants, the CCC grants, if you see yourself as a leader in the progressive Jewish movement in some capacity, you may apply in this category. We expect this category to be super broad. This category will sort of operate in a lot of ways like the overall grant making process did last year. So, spiritual, cultural, identity-based communities, institutions fighting anti-Semitism, movement infrastructure, leadership development, media narrative development, arts and culture activism, production and operations. We'll get a little more into individual artists later and what that means. And people organizing locally or around a specific issue. This list may not be exhaustive. We think it's pretty. I've seen a lot of grantees, and if there's a new category I'm missing here, feel free to throw it in the chat. If you can't see yourself in any of this, um, but we think that courageous action, community leadership, and connection for our movement are things that just about every organization who we're thinking about funding sees as a priority, and those are things that we want to make sure we're encouraging. So again, this can be like very, very broadly interpreted. Organizations of any size may apply for this track. You could be a small org, a larger org. The grants in this track will be $15,000, and we're going to have about 30 of these grants available. One thing, we'll get a little bit into this more later, but we're going to have a maximum of 55 LOIs who are going to be advanced from the LOI proposal to the to be invited to submit a full proposal. And that's going to be based on our evaluation by the JLF steering committee. As we get into the evaluation, I'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to look like. So the grants for individual artists with fiscal sponsorship. These are to give our artists and cultural workers with more time, space, and resources to create work in service of our movements. These are to support artists to take the time they need to deepen their impact and bring their most powerful and prophetic voices to our shared work. We talked with a number of artists about the sort of grants that really make transformative work possible as we were thinking about what to do for this. And what we heard is the most valuable thing is time. Time to not necessarily be just applying over and over and over for grants. Time to really be like time to like think, dream, and be able to think up the most transformative work. Yeah, the prophetic voice, right? To bring that prophetic voice is not something you can do when you're worried about how you're going to eat tomorrow. Uh, And so the grants in this track are going to be at $20,000. We're going to have two of these grants for individual artists available. And we're going to have a maximum of 10 LOIs advanced, again, of which two will be granted. Individual artists must have fiscal sponsorship. Again, if you're an individual artist who has questions about that, grants at jewishliberation.fund. Oh, and I'm going to add too, if you are an artist collective, or you are a arts project, or you're an individual artist looking for a production grant, or like, hey, I need a little bit of money to like make CDs. Um, then you should apply in either the seed grant track or the CCC grant track. This is specifically for taking time to bring your prophetic voice to a new project. Oh, well, this was the next slide. I went ahead of myself. Don't have to read that again. Seed grants for emergent or early stage organizations doing experimental work to fill gaps they see in the Jewish progressive movement ecosystem locally or nationally. The goal of these grants is to seed experimentation into ideation to creatively meet needs in the Jewish progressive movement identified by organizational leaders. So again, this is for generally smaller organizations. Um, you don't you must have been creative within or have a substantial area of your work that has emerged in the last 5 years. So if you're an older organization, right? Like we've talked to organizations who are like, yeah, we've been really small for a long time and we're just like doing this new thing. Then you're also eligible to apply for a seed grant if it's just like an if you have emergent projects. Now again, all of our funding is general operations. There are no project-based grants with Jewish Liberation Fund. But if you can talk about your work and talk about emergent parts of it, that's something that would be that would also allow you to apply for a seed grant. The grant in this track will be $5,400. We'll have 10 seed grants available and a maximum of 18 LOIs advanced based on evaluation by the JLF Steering Committee. And the last category is Launchpad grants. These are for small to mid-sized organizations ready to take necessary steps to become more sustainable. Um, Invitees will be past or current JLF grantees. There's a possibility that if we didn't have enough past grantees who were interested in it, then we might potentially say that we might. But that's going to be the focus is past or current JLF grantees. It'll be $20,000. It'll be 8 grants out of 10 to 12 invited organizations, and really what we're going to be looking for on the back end. I'm not going to get really detailed into this now, but there are a number of metrics sort of demonstrating ability to become a long-term sustainable organization. And feel free to look in the RFP, which I think can be posted in the chat. I'm pretty sure I gave that. Maybe I didn't give that link. Oh, no, it's on our website. It's on our website. You go to our website, and on the website, you can read the RFP is linked. Feel free to click it there, and you'll be able to get a little bit more detail on this particular grant category. As far as the grant terms, our grants are going to be 1 year long. A high percentage of grantees applying for a grant a second time have received them historically, but not all of them. Again, each year is a new grant application. So if you've applied before, you are allowed to apply again, but you're not going to receive favorable treatment. And we're hoping to be able to make multi-year grants in the future. Right now, we're not yet financially able to do that. Um, this year, our grant making budget is around $600,000. We're anticipating proposal requests to be between $2 and $3 million. It's not impossible that it could be even more than that. Again, last year we had 180 applicants, which was like close to a 50%, close to a 80% increase from the year before. Um, so we're really expecting things to continue to be more and more competitive. What's hard is that Sea Grants, fiscal sponsorship, everything, fiscal sponsor can apply to everything. Maya, thanks for asking that question. In every category, fiscal sponsorship is okay. But yeah, so a lot of the time we do have, sometimes it's often just very, very hard to make decisions for grant making, and it's going to be really competitive. So sometimes we may not necessarily have a really clear answer for you on why you don't get a grant. It's just that there are a lot of really amazing organizations, but we do our best through the process. You'll see in a little bit. We do as everything that we can to try and provide a clear answer and or feedback for why you may or may not have received a grant. And one thing I'm gonna that I didn't say earlier that I do want to highlight, one of the mantras that we have at JLF is we want our work to be slow, deep, and irreversible. And in terms of thinking about, these grant sizes and grant tracks, why we're doing them, um, really like this increased demand every year has made it really incredibly hard to sort of make sure that we're increasing our grant pool. Yes, shout out to Ricardo Levins Morales. It's been incredibly difficult to make sure that we're increasing our grant pool in a way that feels sustainable. Both, as I said earlier, to both as I said earlier, so I'm looking at the questions. I'm getting distracted, but I will answer that question now. It's a good question, Leo. Both to in terms of the grant sizes, but also just in terms of it's like becomes really impossible when we don't sort of create a plan with a limited number of grants that are intended to do specific things. It becomes really difficult for us to grow our grant number of grantees in a way that actually feels strategic, that feels like it's coherent to the people who are applying. Uh, and that's really what we're trying to hold with a lot of these new incorporation of grant tracks and more proscriptive grant sizes. And your fiscal sponsor, as long, I mean, I shouldn't say as long as it can be anyone. I don't know. I get probably there's some terrible, if you're like fiscally sponsored by some really, really values line, your fiscal sponsor is not what we're looking at for your fiscal sponsor is not what we're looking at in terms of yeah, exactly. Right. I didn't want to, I was starting to think about C3, C4. Like, I'm like, I don't want to say anything incriminating, but yes, right. Like, and also, I don't think that certain ones that were mentioned in the chat would fiscally sponsor any of the projects who would be applying for a JLF grant and likely to get them. Um, yeah, like Aleph is totally fine, right? Anything that's sort of within line. Yeah, your fiscal sponsor is not what you're judged on. Okay, so the LOI phase. Here is a very brief, short overview of the process. Create an account on Flux Grantmaker and begin your application by April 29th at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern. Now, this one I know I told you I was going to put in the chat. You can do this right now. You can do this right now if you want to make sure you create because there's a whole process. You have to create an account, which as you create the account, our fiscal sponsor at Proteus Fund, who manages the grant portal, will send you back, information to do that. If you've already applied for a JLF grant or any other grant that uses Flux Grant Maker, you'll already have an account. But you must express your intent to apply for a JLF grant by beginning your application by April 29th at 9 a.m. Eastern. You don't have to start writing things, but you have to press that begin button so we see it on the back end and know that you're intending to apply. This is sort of just to make sure, we in the last, we've had some issues with people signing up at the last minute and then having trouble with the deadlines. We really want to do everything we can to sort of like make sure that our application process has every deadline as like fair and easy as we can make it. Um, this is an incredibly easy thing to do. It will take 3 minutes. You just have to press that begin or like apply for JLF button by April 29th at 9 a.m. Eastern. Then you have to submit your LOI by May 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern. So all the contents of the LOI, you submit that by May 4th. Then each LOI will be reviewed by 3 members of the JLF Steering Committee, which we'll get into exactly how that happens later. And eligible applicants will be invited to submit full proposals the week of June 8th. So our LOI process is very straightforward. You will be asked to address the following things in approximately 150 words for each criteria and grant making priority. Um, I know some people find word limits annoying. I'm going to speak to that very quickly. When we had word guidelines, we had certain applications that would come in very close to the guidelines. We had reviewers who were like, "Oh, this is great. I know how long these ones are going to take." And then you had people who and you had applicants who like painstakingly worked to shorten them to the guidelines that we had. And then you had other applicants who would submit things that were 3 times as long. I'm talking about like 4 pages to 14 pages uh, than the guidelines. And that's not fair to other applications, and that's not fair to our community grants making team as well. Because again, it's not our staff who we'll get into this. I guess I haven't said not again, but it's a community grants team who is reviewing these applications and doing everything we can to make this process fair for all applicants is really really important to us. Um, the thing I'll say too is it's not like you have to I think we have a character limit that gives space to go over like literally 150 words. But we're gonna make sure that like no one's submitting things that are like, we said 150 words and you submitted like 2 pages single spaced, which would be way longer than that. Um, so you have to compellingly meet all of the eligibility criteria that I mentioned earlier. Progressive work, work primarily focused on cultivating Jewish involvement in movements for justice and liberation and addressing systemic causes of oppression. And then you must compellingly meet a minimum of three of the grant making priorities, which are written right there. And I'm about to start talking about all of them. So we'll give you the definitions for those in like a couple seconds. Let's see. Let me make sure. Let me go ahead and check the chat. Is there anything I need to answer right now? Uh, okay. We'll get back to okay, 5-4 submission. Um, I think I have that later. Yeah, you should hear on 6-8 if you are moving forward, and that's when everyone will find something. Yeah. But it's when you're moving forward. If you've clicked apply for a JLF grant, then you have begun. But yeah, sorry, Jessica's got that. Jessica's got that. Jessica's got that. We'll come back, Alexandra. Save that one for the end, about individual artists. And that's correct. Yeah, sorry, I should have actually mentioned that. Yes, Maya. Thank you for asking that one. The third eligibility requirement is not in the application for individual artists. We sort of say that, like, if you're doing progressive arts work, that automatically falls within the criteria of stuff that we could do as systems change, like helping people live and dream into the world to come. So, thank you for asking that question. Note to self. Can someone on my team make a note to make sure I edit that for next year? Great, thank you. Okay, grant making priorities, anti-racist. So, this applicant practices and articulates a clear anti-racist praxis within and across their organization, its culture, and its day-to-day operations. This applicant can demonstrate how an explicit commitment to combat racism and white supremacy has informed their programming, strategy, theory of change, and internal processes and culture. This applicant can demonstrate how an explicit commitment to challenge race. All right, I accidentally left that up twice. Excuse me on that. Essentially, what we're looking for here is, you're demonstrating your internal culture's anti-racist praxis. Um, we're not looking for like one thing we get a lot is like we believe this thing, like we have this certain politic that makes us anti-racist. Um, what we're really looking for is to learn about your internal culture as much as we can in terms of how you think intentionally about making sure your organization is anti-racist. Catalyzing. And I want to say too, some of these definitions are a little bit different from last year. This catalyzing and movement building ones are ones that if you're familiar with the process, pay attention to these because these have changed a little bit because we got a lot of feedback that people wanted more clarity on how those ones are different. So this applicant either articulates a proven track record or an intention and plan to generate impact beyond the immediate scope of direct work. They demonstrate they have or plan to develop a replicable model for impactful work that can be implemented in other communities and geographies, or they have documented successes and learnings with an intention and plan to bring those lessons to our movements, or the applicants can demonstrate that their work has led to the development of leaders that have made a meaningful impact in progressive Jewish movement work and communities. In short, what we're looking for here is that your work goes outside the halls of your community, your building, if you have one of those, etc. Uh, this work, I have a note. I have a note. I don't think I actually. These are all slightly different for individual artists, and I'm realizing that I have not updated. I don't think I updated a whole section on this to make the definitions for individual artists. If you're an individual artist, stick around. Maybe we'll figure out a backup info session. But they are definitions that are specifically related to arts work. Maybe two info sessions will be worth doing next year. Anyway, this is about making sure that the work moves outside of your community, not just being specifically, um, it's not just an organization who huddles together. It's not just an organization who like has a project that just stays there, but it's something that has a broader impact on the movement. Movement building. This applicant is deeply connected to and understands themselves as part of a progressive movement ecosystem and can demonstrate how they contribute to building the economic, narrative, cultural, and people power of the Jewish progressive movement. This applicant demonstrates the connection, coordination, and/or collaboration with other people, projects, and organizations that are working towards structural change, and/or they demonstrate they are engaging people and communities in cultural, religious, and healing practices that collectively channel their energy and resources towards organizing and/or activism. Uh, and so, what we're really looking for in movement building that is slightly different from catalyzing is this is about just really making sure that you're connected to a movement. That the work you're doing is not just it's not isolated. Like you could be doing really good work, but if you're not sort of like connected to other people um, who are part of that Jewish movement, then your work's going to be more limited in its power, and it's going to be more isolated. Additionally, uh, making sure that the people that if you're there are a lot of spiritual communities, but sort of making sure that this is a spiritual community where a lot of people who are engaged in organizing, activism, uh, are both like being mobilized, and also those people are part of a movement who are the people who are actually coming to your community, not just people who are like, yeah, like I vote a certain way, but also like, hey, I'm really part of something and I'm connected to other people in the Jewish left. Okay. Let's see. I saw a question that's interesting. Yeah, what if it's virtual, not location based? Uh, can you go ahead and throw in the chat? Are you talking about for the specific catalyzing or movement building criteria? Or are you talking about just like generally? Because I do think this is, yeah. So yeah, so there are initiatives who are virtual, but like it doesn't mean there are initiatives that are virtual but are connected to other communities, right? Like I think Black Jewish Liberation Collective has been one of our grantees. They didn't apply last year, but they are organizing people all around the country, right? And those people are often leaders in different progressive communities, spiritual communities, etc. Across the country. They have events in partnership um, with a number of other movement groups. So I don't think that that is I don't think that that is disqualifying. I think like organizations who are movement building and doing movement building work, whether you're location based or virtual, should still be able to qualify for that criteria. And so we'll get more into just bear with me as far as your second question for how these are evaluated. So, as far as the next grant making priority, rooted in, accountable, and/or serving Jews of color, Sephardim, Mizrahim, and/or poor working class Jews. Um, I don't have to reread the second one, but meaningful leadership roles, accountability relationships, and/or decision-making structures are rooted in or accountable to Jews of color, Sephardim, Mizrahim, and/or Jews from poor or working class backgrounds, including experience identifying, developing, and retaining these leaders. Or that they serve Jews of color, Sephardim, Mizrahim, and Jews from poor working class backgrounds in a really meaningful, specific way. I want to be clear that what does not satisfy this is like we have events that are sliding scale. We get that a lot. Don't put that for this. If you put we have events that are sliding scale, you're not going to get credit for this. But really making sure that these are organizations who are rooted in those communities and serve them. Like that's one of our priorities is sort of trying to serve communities who are structurally marginalized in Jewish community, and this is why this is one of our grant making priorities. And finally, tricky to fund. This applicant is unlikely to receive funding from institutional Jewish funders on account of the organization's strong commitment to progressive values, including but not limited to how they relate to Israel Palestine. Um, And for this, you have to demonstrate that courageous action, in particular around issues related to Israel Palestine or other contentious topics, have made it more difficult for you to receive funding from institutional Jewish funders. This one really specifically is about, level of commitment to progressive issues and causes, and taking risks and being courageous in ways that traditional Jewish funders uh, might overlook. Okay, before we do it, do we have any more questions on any of those grant making priorities? Okay, I'm going to continue on, but definitely put it in the chat, and maybe if I get to the end of this, I'll get back to this. So, three members of the steering committee will read each application. Oh, sorry, the steering committee evaluates our LOIs. Three members will read each application and rate each criteria and priority, yes or no. Uh, Again, you must fulfill every single one of the criteria. Jewish, primarily focused on, sorry, progressive, primarily focused on increasing Jewish participation in moves for justice and liberation, and systemic. And then if you don't meet a criteria and you believe you do, they will provide, it might only be a sentence, but some rationale for why they feel like why they feel like an application fell short. And then the highest rated applications on each track by average across reviews are admitted to submit a full proposal. So for example, if there's three reviewers and one person rates it a three and two people rated a four, that would be scored as like a 3.67 or whatever. Uh, and the top 45 will move through. Ties will be voted on by the steering committee. And again, it'll be 18 seed grants, 10 artist grants, and 45 CCC grants. In addition to that, we're going to allow the steering committee to invite up to 10 more CCC grants, sort of like at large. Again, this is the first year because of the huge demand for JLF grants. This is the first year we're changing this process such that we're really just like evaluating by the alignment with our criteria or with our priorities. And so while we look, sorry, yeah, this is the number of people who are going to be advanced from stage one to stage two. This is not the number of grants that eventually go out. It's going to be about 30 CCC grants, but this is the number that we'll actually invite to the second stage. So it'll be 45 to 55 CCC grants. Um, that sort of to make sure that we're able to fill any holes that we see. Oh my God, like we think a couple organizations are certain there's a certain area of work that uh, wasn't able to make it through as well just because of the it wasn't able to make it through as well with the new priorities. Although we did look at last year's numbers and we think it should be pretty aligned. Um, we want to make sure we have that. One thing I'm going to add here that I didn't put in the slideshow is as you think about what to apply for, obviously the CCC grants are more money than the seed grants, and there seem to be more of them that we're going to be giving. But I think also like what's worth noting is that like there are a lot of like larger, more established organizations who definitely will be applying for those CCC grants who are not going to be in that pool for seed grants. So really think about that, in terms of like who's applying for what as you think about, what makes sense for your organization or project. So again, key dates: begin your application by April 29th at 9 a.m. Eastern. I cannot say that enough. Begin your application by that time. LOIs are due May 4th, 12 p.m. Eastern, and then the week of June 8th, we will communicate the invitation to submit a proposal. That's when you'll find out if you were invited or if you were not invited. So that's when the first round decisions will be uh, sent. And no, you cannot apply for multiple categories currently. Okay, the full proposal process. So as we just started, you are, invited to submit a proposal week of June 8th. They'll be due about 3 weeks later on June 29th. In July and August, we have our community grant making team who will review, discuss, and make grant making recommendations. The steering committee will then review and approve the CGT recommendations. And then Proteus Funds Board, excuse me, excuse me. Proteus Funds Board, that's our fiscal sponsor, will make the final grant approvals. In September, aspirationally, okay, aspirationally, that's when we will make the grant award notifications and release the funds. Um, as well as, for the labor of submitting a full proposal that's unfunded, submit, we also pay out $500 stipends for that labor for people who were invited to the full proposal stage. For more information on the Launchpad grants, you can either stay to the Q&A at the end, or you can look at the RFP. There should be a little bit more information in there, but what we're looking for. And I think there should be something on the website. We'll come back to that question later about the organization-based, Jeremy. Um, and we'll come back to the CCC versus seed grants later as well. Okay, so full proposal contents. There's going to be a narrative proposal, a proposal request amount, which you still have to put, but it's going to now actually just be dictated by the type of grant you're applying for. Your budget, and then documents of incorporation of fiscal sponsorship. Uh, I actually think we did cut photos this year, so that was originally in there until quite recently. Um, so, the narrative proposal. Most applicants will answer the following four questions. Tell us about the impact your organization has had on the community you work with. Tell us about the impact that receiving funds from JLF could have on your organization, and what impact would you hope that it has on the Jewish progressive movement more broadly? So we're sort of asking you to talk about the impact it'll have on you and what it'll make possible. Uh, Tell us about some challenges you faced and how you've worked through them. We're not looking for organizations to be perfect, but just sort of to get a sense of, yeah, like how do you work through challenges? Are you a resilient organization? Anyone who says we haven't experienced challenges, especially right now, I don't believe you. I do not believe you. And then what are your organization's long-term goals and how are you moving towards them? Sort of looking for organizations who are strategic and seeing some impact move towards long-term goals. And then there are going to be two supplemental questions based on the type of organization and the grant track the applicant is on. So for example, like in seed grants, for seed grants, like it'll ask like it won't necessarily ask about the impact that you have had, but also about the impact you're like hoping to have, because ideally, probably it's like a newer project or initiative or something like that. Or, I guess the funding's for the organization, but like we know that your organization is doing something new, and that we want that to hear about that too. And then two supplemental questions. That'll be yeah. So that's that. About 250 words. Um, Individual artists will have different questions. Okay, I'm showing you some love, individual artists. Did I forget about the definitions being different earlier? Yes. But did I also make sure to include the different questions that you're going to have here? Also, yes. So you're going to talk about your artistic practice and vision, how your work contributes to the building of a hopeful and visionary radical culture, the artistic work you're most proud of having done, and why, the impact your work has had on the culture of the progressive Jewish movement, and if this is like a new thing you're working on, like what impact do you imagine for it, and how will you assess that? What would become possible for the quality and scope of your work if you were better resourced next couple of years? And then how do you intend to move your work into the comments? I can tell you that I know that in the catalyzing definition, it talks about moving into the comments, but just about making sure that the work is actually not just going to be made, but like, hey, I have a plan to actually make sure this gets out here to people. And again, about 250 words. Budgets. Do not stress about the budget. We don't expect every org to have perfect budgets, especially young orgs. Things that are realistic are often very helpful. I'll come back to that later, Madeline. Things that are realistic are very helpful. And again, if you engage in lobbying, you must submit a bifurcated budget with lobbying versus non-lobbying activities. So this was an actual this was an earlier stage organization. I think this was like 5 years ago or something like this. But this was an organization that actually applied for JLF funding. As you can see, it's not too complicated here. You probably could find a template like this online. Honestly, if you do need help with budget templates, also just email grants@jewishliberation.fund. That's another thing that we could just like send you some support on if you needed it. Uh, and again, this was an organization that was not as robust at the time that they were applying. We have lots of applications that are even lower budget than this. I mean, the budget itself don't look so much less complicated than this. It would be hard to really look that much less complicated. But even with a smaller budget, we don't expect everything to be so polished. And then a more mature organization, looked like this. Uh, for this organization, it made a lot more sense to, and I think we would have expected for someone of their size and the complexity of their work to see a budget that looks more like this. Like I think if, someone was applying with what is it, eh, over $1 million in a budget, we probably would expect to see a bit more than what we saw on the previous slide. Um, but so, whatever feels appropriate for you all, whatever feels appropriate for you all. Like, don't stress over it. Don't freak out. We're not going to be like, oh my God, they're not professional with their budget. We understand like new initiatives, new directors, things like that. So, full proposals are reviewed by the JLF Community Grant Making Team, which we assemble via a series of recommendations. We ask some of our grantees for people. We ask our, we ask our, I, if you email me, I can send you a bifurcated budget example. Um, for individual artists, you can write about like the work that you're doing and sort of what you're anticipating it costing. So we don't have any expectations. No. I mean, as we talked about, like, the idea is that like for individual artists, you sort of have to like, well, I'll start by saying everything that we do is general operating expenses. And so, for work that we're so we really don't have like expectations. We sort of like trust that an organization or an applicant who applies, who receives a JLF grant will have the best understanding of how those resources should be used. And I think like, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about what we heard from individual artists and what they need is, people like time, right? And so a lot of that just being like, hey, if you're gonna bring like your prophetic voice to our movement, we're here to give you time to actually do that. So however the resources are used, we don't have expectations about that. We'll miss those of you who are not able to do this. I never promised it's going to be an hour. On our work calendar, it's an hour and a half. So, community grant making team, we get via recommendation from grantees, steering committee staff, a number of respected orgs, and just like leaders, we solicit them. Um, Currently, we have 6 returning members. We might end up having a few more that we haven't heard from last year's 11-person team. We're planning on having at least 6 new members for the CCC grants and then a new body for individual artist grants. Again, grounded in ecosystem approach, across strategies, organization types, geographically diverse. Though that team will split into a small team to evaluate proposals. And this year, more than in previous years, we're going to have that team focus more heavily on the impact of applicants rather than value alignment. So in the past, there's sort of been like, and anyone who's above three, who averages above three goes forward. We're sort of saying we're only really inviting a number of organizations who already have a really high alignment with our values to move forward into the full proposal phase. A big part of the reason for this too is when we talk about what we want our grants to be able to accomplish for these organizations. A lot of these questions that we're asking that are specific to the types of organizations that are applying. Uh, these questions are sort of about being able to determine uh, do these organizations like will our funding be able to do that? Um, is this a narrative? Is this a press organization who speaks truth to power and holds power accountable? Is this a organizing initiative who takes courageous action that is also strategic? These are the sorts of things that we're going to be more heavily focused on, sort of like that long, like again, like impact, how you're moving towards your long-term goals, etc. More in the second round than in the first round when we've already narrowed down by people who are highly aligned with our values. And then all the members of the community grant making team, after being in small teams, will come together to sort of, collaborate, talk through things, and determine their final recommendations. The steering committee and JLF staff will collaborate. There's a sort of 10% allocation, set aside for the steering committee and staff to to collaborate on. And then the steering committee itself will review and approve all grant making recommendations before it goes to our fiscal sponsor, Proteus Funds Board, and then we tell applicants the grant decisions. One piece of our process, as we said, we do everything we can to make sure that you have the opportunity to answer questions and get answers about why your project may or may not be funded. But during the process, uh, soon after our first community grant making team meeting, we will surface questions to send to applicants about their proposals. Not everyone will get a question. But one thing we realized was unfair was before we had this, people were then being evaluated and they would be like, well, we don't know what their answer to this would be. If we knew the answer, it could actually be really good. And we want to make sure we give applicants the opportunity to provide all the context they can for their work. Uh, so there'll be a form that gets sent out with the questions the community grant making team has generated. And if there are questions for your work, which is neither a good nor a bad sign, uh, you will have the opportunity to answer them, and then in our second community grant making team meeting, we'll be able to take that into consideration. Here are just some examples of past questions that you can go ahead and check out for a couple seconds. In terms of the overall timeline, they would be in between the first and second community grant making team with meetings, which are one after you've submitted your proposal, and probably about 3 weeks after proposals are due. It's the community grant making team would have had time to read and review it, um, and then meet once. So probably about 3 weeks to a month after the proposal due, like sort of mid end of July. But we'll try our best to also let you know ahead of time. We'll try our best to let you know ahead of time that these are coming so you don't miss them. And we should have like a phone number for you, and we're gonna be like, no, seriously, like please answer this. Um, It'll be something between like 5 days to like 12 days, depending on how much time we have between those two community grant making team meetings. But like a little bit, between again, it's not like there's gonna be like five new questions. It's gonna be like there's like maybe one question, maybe two questions for specific things that they need clarity on to be able to make a reasonable decision for your grant making. So I want to clarify what the JLF staff role will be. You do not need to have a personal relationship with a JLF staff member to receive funding or professional relationship. Like you do not need to know me. You do not need to have been in a call with me. You don't need to get on the phone with me. In particular, in the LOI phase, we really do not make grant or funding recommendations. Like in the LOI phase, like it's literally just like up to the steering committee. I'm not telling them whether to review one thing or another. I'm not saying I think this is catalyzing or not catalyzing. Um, Getting to know me will not help you. We do collaborate with the steering committee on recommending those discretionary grants that are about 10% of the total grant making budget. That we're talking in that about, like four grants with a body of like now there's including the program team, you're talking about close to 10 people. So again, it's that in that part, it's again a very small role. And also, what we're looking for there is not even necessarily just, oh, this is my favorite project, a pet project I want to move through. But at that point, it's like, where are are there holes in what in the organizations who we've invited to apply for funding? Did we just like totally miss out on, I don't know, spiritual communities in the American Southwest? That's probably not what it would be, but I'm just making something up, right? Um, We're here to support you throughout the process. Shoot us emails, ask us questions, and meet with us once through each step of the process. And we're here to help with technical issues in the portal. We like it, but it's inevitable. Accessibility concerns, email about that. But it's our job, the TLDR, it's our job to make your proposal as strong as possible. It's our job to do everything we can within what we have the time and ability to do that is fair to all of the applicants. Okay. It is our job to help make your application as strong as possible, not to make decisions. So During the LOI stage, we'll answer questions via our LOI form, which should get posted in the chat right now. Wow, wow, look at that. Boom. It just appeared there. Um, Submit questions about the LOI via that form. We are in the office Monday through Thursday and responding to that. I will be checking it and making sure to answer questions. That's the best place to submit questions about the LOI. If you have questions about the process, you can email me. But if you have questions about definitions, your application, like what should I do, grant track, like put that in the form. We're checking that. We will get back to you. If we don't, then we'll find a way to rectify that. But we will get back to you. We will get back to you. And again, in the LOI stage, we do not make recommendations to steering committee. During the full proposal phase, each applicant will receive answering questions via email or voicemail about the JLF grant making process, and we'll read a drafted proposal one time and provide either written feedback via email or in comments on a shared doc, or we'll have a 45-minute call with you to provide feedback. Um, we sort of had to make a decision about how much we are going to provide just to sort of make sure that it's fair to all applicants. There were certain applicants who would like really take up what I think is an unfair amount of our time and just really, well, I know I'm saying I think. It was definitely an unfair amount of our time to other applicants who were not willing to take as much of our time. And really just sort of making sure that we're providing fair and equitable support across our applicant network. After grant decisions are communicated, if you request it, you can request it. If you're declined, you can reach out to your program officer for a 30-minute call to discuss one 30-minute call to discuss why you did or did not receive a grant and how you to strengthen your application for a future grant cycle. Um, we won't reach out we won't reach out to you to be like, hey, uh, I'm looking to schedule this, but we are available for you to reach out to us about this. Um, this might take place later if we're totally slammed with meetings about the current grant making cycle. Um, but it is available for you. We will make sure we do it. And again, and at every stage, I should mention too, we also do our best to ask our community grant making team to provide feedback on why applicants were not funded as well. Like that's a dedicated portion of time that we have in our second community grant making team meeting. Um, so we should have some feedback for you, unless we have some like technical errors or something like that. Extensions. We have done our best to come up with a fair extension policy that should give, everyone opportunity for extensions if they need it. Extensions that are granted will be exactly 1 week from the deadline. So you'll get a 1 week extension if you request one. We'll grant them for two reasons. The first one is pre-planned long-term conflicts in the application window. Like I'm gonna like the dates are already set and there's like 2 weeks and I'm gonna be in uh Prague for like this whole month and I like am on this like I'm gonna be out of Wi-Fi and like I can't work on the application. Okay, we can give you a an extension. But you have to once we announce the dates and once this or at least once the stage has opened, you have to request it within the first week. So it can't be like we got to like, you have pre-planned travel that you already knew about and it's like the day before the application and you're like, oh my God, I like need another week. And you have to be unavailable for at least 75% of the time between the opening of the stage and that stage's due date. And then also extends for serious and sudden crisis, like life happens. Um, if any of these terrible things happen to you, first of all, I hope to God that I pray to Hashem that none of these things happen to you, that none of these things happen to you. But if they do happen to you, we understand that's a part of life. Let us know. We'll give you a week extension. I should add as well, part of the reason that we, do need to be firm with extensions is that, there's as you can tell, there's a lot of moving parts in our process. We have like our community, like we have to send our review, we have to have our community grants team and steering committee review, and then these reviews have to go to our fiscal sponsor, and they have to send us a report back from Flux, and we have to format the report, And like it really can set a lot of things back, in terms of our process if we're not able to like continue things moving forward. Okay, let's see. It says this meeting is being transcribed, so I can't. Yes, so the grant making portal. I cannot say this enough. I said this a lot last year, and then we had one grantee where we had some issues with getting in there. It was slightly different. We've made that's why we have this that's why we have this you must begin your application very set. Go to the portal. Go to the portal. Log in or create your account. If you need to and you forget, click the forgot password button. Open grant opportunities. Apply for Jewish Liberation Fund. I hope that when I go to this portal right after this call, I see that number has increased by a number of you all who are here. But by the 29th at 9 a.m., do that. First time applicant, again, just the important note here is that registration requests are reviewed through the day by the Proteus grant making uh, team, but will not be approved on the weekends. So like they are in the office 5 days. So uh, on Fridays you can create an account, but just make sure you do that. Create the account. Make sure you press begin by 9 a.m. Will we know for sure you've seen it? I don't know the back end of Flux and whether you get an email that tells you that you've done it or not. So I don't actually know the answer to that question. Um, okay, you don't. You don't. Um, I'll think on that. I'm not gonna have the answer to that right now. I'm gonna be realistic about that. Uh, I started it. Great. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and check. But honestly, as long as you can log in and you have logged into a JLF grant and you're in that portal and you see things, like okay, yep, you can enter zeros for fiscal sponsor and add that later. Bring that question up, Jessica. Let's bring that question up at the end, please. I'm going to come back to what to do on the fiscal sponsor. Okay, one more review. Application creation deadline, 29th of April. May 4th, LOIs due. June 8th, successful LOIs invited and other decisions communicated. 29th, proposal. That should say June 9th. That should say June 9th. Proposals due. Through July and August, June 29th. July and August, review, discussion, and grant recommendations by the community grant making team. Steering committee reviews and approves. Proteus Funds Board makes final grant approvals. We will try and tell you once we have our internal decisions made before they go to Proteus Fund, but sometimes that's one of the holdups that just like takes a second. And honestly, that's another reason to like it's like the 14-page applications make that whole thing take way longer for us to get this Proteus Funds board. And then September, grant award notifications and funds released, $500 stipends issued to unfunded applicants that were invited to submit full proposals. All right. We did it, everyone. We did it. Round of applause to you all because, God, that was a lot of information. God, that was a lot of information. I was just talking for a really long time, and I'm still seeing people who have the camera on nodding. So, yeah, props to you all for keeping me going too, uh, including even with some of my mistakes here. So, um, first note before the Q&A is if you are an individual artist, go into the RFP. You'll find all the different definitions for individual artists on that RFP. They're all just like slightly different, but like targeted towards artists' work. And you can ask questions about that in this time as well. I wish I could tell you the page at the top of my head. I cannot. I cannot. Any questions? Any questions? Or let's start with Jessica. Can you go ahead and throw me the ones that I said we should keep?
Yes. Oh, starting from the beginning or the most recent one?
Let's start from the beginning, please.
Not totally clear as an independent artist which grant category to apply for and how to frame the application if the grants are not project-based.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the questions that we are asking, they're generally about your artistic practice. And so you should talk about some of the exciting things that you might have coming up. But sort of like let me see, can I go back? This is the full proposal stage. I wish I had not forgotten the I wish I had not forgotten the definitions for artists. We probably should just have a separate info session for that grant. But again, this is new this year. So it's you're able to talk about, like, you look at the kind of questions we're asking. It's about your artistic work. Like, what are you most proud of? Tell us about your artistic practice and vision. Like, how do you feel like your work is contributing to a hopeful and visionary radical culture? Like, those are things that you don't, the things that we ask are not things that you like have to just be like, oh, like I'm writing about uh this movie that I'm making, or like whatever. I'm writing about this exhibit. So the yeah, so it's intended to make it such that you're able to write generally about your work. Next question.
Does leadership of funded groups need to be Jewish only? My group has shared Palestinian Jewish leadership.
It doesn't need to be Jewish only, but it needs to be clear that the work is primarily focused on organizing, Jews into, like, that has to be a primary focus of the work. Organizing Jewish community into movements for justice and liberation. So it's like, there are organizations that we have who do interfaith work. There are organizations we have who work with Palestinians. But the orgs that we fund, it should be clear that, that's the primary focus of their work in some capacity.
Follow up from the same asker. We started a couple of years ago, but we have a lot of visibility, movement, and have played an outsized advocacy role for our infrastructure. How would we decide whether to apply for a Courageous Action grant or a seed grant?
So can you say that to me one more time? I got distracted by the chat.
Yeah, they're a new organization with a small budget and no staff, but they have a lot of visibility and connections. How
Mm.
would we decide whether to apply for a Courageous Action grant or a seed grant?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's difficult for me to really give an exact answer on that, especially because this is a new thing for us. But I think that the thing I said earlier that I would really consider is, we're not expecting, like, the sort of flagship local or issue-based organizing communities or initiatives, things like that, or like the spiritual communities that Kol Tzedek Synagogue is not going to apply for a seed grant, right? And they're an example of an organization like J Fred is not going to apply for a seed grant. And so if like in that round, you're going to be, whoever you're applying as, like, you're going to be competing against organizations of that caliber for impact too. And so if you feel like, hey, I want to go for that, I just want to go for the $15,000, and you feel like you can write about the, courageous action, et cetera, that you're taking, then, like, go for it, right? If you feel if you feel like that's worth doing. If you're at an organization where you feel like, hey, the $5,400 would actually make a pretty substantial impact for us, like that would be really meaningful for us, right? Uh, and you feel like you're someone that is sort of fulfilling that need, then I would totally encourage you to, consider the seed grant. Um, like, I would say it's less money, but you're going to be competing against less sort of prominent organizations and things like that. Like, I would add too, right? It's like part of the reason for that is, like, like for an organization with like $1 million budget, like a $5,000 grant feels, it doesn't feel as worthwhile, right? And so we want to make sure that the organizations that we're giving seed grants to are organizations for whom that money will still be impactful and sort of seeding new things. And, like, the hope would be that as both that organization grows and we grow, um, well, both the seed grant size would hopefully grow as well, but also that organization could potentially end up applying for um, one of the other types of grants in the future. Next question, please.
Is there a way to be confident that you know the application was started? Somebody has filled out a few fields and got a thank you message, but want to make sure that that it is for sure started.
If you filled out a few fields and got a thank you message, it's definitely started. You can shoot the grants email an email to be like, what do you see an application for this in here? And if you do send your EIN too, it can actually be a little bit helpful for us or your fiscal sponsors, like to be able to like find it in the back end that way. Um, but yeah, please go ahead and shoot us an email with the name of your org and the EIN. Because sometimes there's some wonky things which shows up as the fiscal sponsor, and Proteus is like working on fixing some of that right now.
Can you speak to what is meant by accountability relationships to Jews of color?
Yeah, I mean, where's the definition? Wow, I sure did a lot of slides today, huh? I mean, my God, I went. Okay, here, past it. Okay, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. It all looked like one because the slides are so similar. I know, not a lot of fun graphics on this or custom animation. Sorry, everyone. Uh, Yeah, so meaningful leadership roles, accountability relationships, or decision-making structures are rooted and are accountable to Jews of color, Sephardim, Mizrahim, and/or Jews from poor working-class backgrounds, including experience identifying, developing, and retaining these leaders, or just like very significant and substantial parts of the community are really being served. Like this is our definition. This is what we mean when we say that. You can look at that first bullet point, especially, and say, looking at meaningful leadership roles, accountability relationships, so people are like able to, hold people accountable in your organization, decision-making structures, and then experience identifying, developing, and retaining these leaders is the other important part of that. Next question.
Since the grants are for general operating, should the budget reflect the entirety of an organization's expenses? And what is the grant term for these grants? Does the grant year begin in September when decisions are conveyed, or does it begin later?
It should be January to January, I'm pretty sure. And what was the first part of that again?
Since the grants are for general operating,
Oh, right.
should the
Yeah. Yes.
budget
Yes.
reflect the
Yes. The answer is
entirety? Yeah.
yes. Yes. The
Yes.
answer is yes. Don't write a project budget.
What sort of budget are you looking for from individual artists?
Probably slightly more broad. I think, yeah, I think on that one you can be pretty broad about just like, the budget for your like artistic practice, and like it's fine if that includes like living expenses or things like that.
We only have a couple more. Can you confirm that? I think you already did that, but can you confirm that funding isn't project-based, but rather organization-based? And if so, how does JLF view org-based apps as different from project-based apps?
We don't take project-based apps. Okay, okay. Maybe you're asking specifically, like, write about your organization. Like, we're going to give general operating expenses. It means you can use it for salary, you can use it for whatever projects you want. Um, I guess for context, in case that person, this would be helpful to them. Like project-based applications are like, so like, let's say, um, Jews for justice in cake making was submitting an application. Okay. Uh, you know, if they wanted to apply for a project, they could say, okay, we're having our the Great Jewish Bake Off competition on, February 3rd of next year, and it's going to be really good and it's going to be super justicey. And so we want to apply for $15,000 for the Great Jewish Bake Off. And that money, so they would submit a budget for like what that project looks like. And then we would make a grant and it would be like that money is all dedicated towards making that project happen. What we do is we say, just tell us about your org. And as part of telling us about your org, you will, the Jews for Justice and Cake Baking, you will tell us part of your work that's really exciting is the Great Jewish Bake Off. Uh, but our funding is going to your organization broadly, so really just like telling us like what are the things you do. You can focus on certain parts of the work that you feel are more exciting and compelling. That's totally fine. Um, that's totally fine. But yeah, sorry, I was looking at the chat again. That's totally fine. But your application broadly should be like about your, whether it's your artistic practice broadly or your organization applying applicant broadly.
So there's a couple more questions from the chat recently. Can artist grants include independent curatorial work, or is that better suited for a different grant type?
Um, I would guess that okay, define independent curatorial work for me really quickly. Let's see. You can come off mute,
Hey,
Amalia.
yeah, hey. I guess it's thinking about proposing an exhibition where I would be seeking out artists, taking on the cost of the application funds to different spaces to have that exhibition come to life. And paying for shipping fees and proposing an exhibition that is in line with my artistic practice, but not necessarily just an exhibition of my own work.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think, and you should shoot me an email on this, or
Sure.
sorry, not don't shoot me an email. Fill out the LOI form. Fill out the LOI form. I'm inclined to think that that would be, depending on sort of the nature of it, probably more in line for like a seed grant or a CCC grant, like one of the other types. Because I think really really like the artist grants are like take this and like live. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, take this and live and like do things. But I think let me see if I can. Where's the language I had on the artist? Yeah, so like distribution. Okay, I probably should have said it been a little more clear here too. But like basically things like like things that are not like I'm just looking for all the time in the world to like dream something up or like time to dream something up should go in one of the other grant types. And so like a seed grant would make sense if you can be like, hey, like this is a kind of interesting project and like there's a interesting and sort of there's a need for this that I can like demonstrate what I'm filling here. I think that would make sense there. And like what we're really looking for, and I do think we do have more specific language that I shortened for just so I didn't write it all on the slide in the RFP. But like if you're working on a project that is mostly about like if you're working on a project and it's sort of about like just getting something into the world, um, you should apply on one of the other two grant tracks.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question here. We don't have fiscal sponsorship, but we have relationships with the local 501(c)(3) orgs that would be willing to take on this role for us. Does this sponsorship have to be an already existing arrangement, or could this be something we arrange now for applying?
Oh yes, great. Someone else put something about this earlier too. Maybe this was the one that I was like, save it for later. Um, it does not have to be set, but you have to have it. You have to get it done by the. It was either by the first or second steering or community grant making team meeting. There is actually language about this in the RFP that you can go ahead and check out, and it'll also be in the grant making portal. Yep, thank you. August 1st. Thank you, Tamar. So you don't have to have it set, but you have to express in the LOI phase that you're in communication. You have to have like a just like some written communication from a potential fiscal sponsor being like, we're interested in working through this with you. And then you have to have it set by August 1st. And the reason for that is because when we, the reason for that is to make sure, yeah, exactly. So to receive the grant, you have to be 501(c)(3) or fiscally sponsored, and we really want to make sure that by our second community grant making team meeting, they're making decisions based on who we know we can make a grant to. It's like if someone says that they're in process and like, oh, they just don't have it, and they, for another like 6 months, like now we just held up a grant that could have gone to another organization at that point. So really just like has to be done by August 1st, which I'm pretty sure is right. I'm pretty sure is right. I didn't look that up just now, but I'm pretty sure that that's right. Thank you, Tamar.
And Rebecca asked this question before and I missed it. My apologies. Do you prioritize initiatives who are collaborative or slash creating partnerships?
So in terms of like movement building, first of all, that's like one of those priorities that I think is very strong for applications like that. And I think it would totally be like you'd be welcome to apply in some sort of in coalition with another organization or applicant, something like that. Um, it's hard, like it's not like an explicit thing that we prioritize beyond the fact that it is literally one of our grant making priorities. And I think that you're able to, if you're able to talk about in the sort of like impact section or like sort of how your work is like moving towards having an impact on our movement, I think that that can be a compelling storyline. Um, but it's not like, it's not like, oh, this organization like is applying with another organization, then we're definitely going to fund that. They can't make promises like that. And again, I should reiterate too, like I'm not the person who you really have to impress to receive a grant. Like I'm here to help you and do the best I can of giving an answer. But I can't always give like a 100% answer because, I might like help assemble the community grant making team and help orient them, but I'm not like sitting there on the calls like recommending to them what they do.
We have one, two, three, four more questions. One you wanted me to make sure that I brought up for you at the end.
Amazing. All right, look, I got nowhere to be. I get this pays my bills, so I'm here for the rest of you all's questions, at least until 5. Then they stop paying my bills. But while this is paying my bills, I'm here to answer you all's questions.
All right. Do you pick multiple ones? Assuming applications for the same slash similar areas of focus, or tend to choose as diverse a range of focus as possible?
Yeah, it can depend on the strength of applications. I think that what we encourage our community grant making team to do is not is to make sure that things are spread out. But like, it's never like it's never like it's like, oh, there's like one like, oh, we funded like one of this thing, so we can't fund any more of those. Like for most projects, issue areas, there's like a fair number of applicants. So it's like and a fair number like grants that go out, right? Like we're talking about a total of, between 40 and 50 grants depending on our final grant making budget. So like it's not like if we fund like one organizing initiative, we're like not going to fund any other ones.
The Conference on the Jewish Left is basically an annual project. Does that disqualify the CJL?
I would not say that it disqual. I think there are other things that are just like, whether it's conferences or like different, right? Like there are different like courses or like trainings that happen on certain timelines, and so sort of um, as long as you like are like have a physical sponsorship, etc. Like I think it's within the realm of possibility. Or like it's it's not something that's just like disqualified just for that, as long as you're able to be like we're a thing applying with a physical sponsor.
Would a series of poetry readings about Israel Palestine by a Muslim and Jew of color poets be considered in the individual artist category?
No. I was like a sophomore in high school once, and the teachers answered something no, and we all just cracked up. No one ever just does that. No, that should probably be something. Again, that's a bit of a that's a bit of like a very specific project, and it would be that we would need to know a bit more about like what's the organization doing that is then like writing about that as one of the things that they do. That would be who should apply, not that specific project.
All right, and then we have one more before the last question that you had highlighted. I'm also wondering if you get a large number of student groups applying for these grants and whether there are any specific standards or questions you'd have for us because of this status.
We have only we have only had, I think, maybe like one. I, there was like it was like Jewish Student Press Service, I think. I can't remember if they got a grant or not, to be honest with you. But I think that's the one specifically student thing that I remember. Um, I don't think there's specific questions. Like you still like the specific question not about being a student. Uh, it's more so just about like what are the honestly, it's probably a lot of grad students who apply, to be honest with you. They're just not applying as grad students, but I bet there's a whole lot of, I bet there's some grad students in here. And shout out to you if you're doing a PhD. I know that's very hard. But yeah, there's not specific questions. It'll be about the nature of your work in the same way that any other questions would be about like, if you're organizing like Jew of color community culturally on like a campus, like you'll get questions that are about that. If you're organizing like, if you're organizing like locally like Jewish community for like Jews on your campus for like um fair wages or something like that, like you'll get questions about like organizing around a specific issue.
Okay, last question, returning back to it on registering. Can you enter zeros for fiscal sponsorship and add that later for artists specifically?
Yes, and then do the same thing that I mentioned earlier about finding a relationship with a fiscal sponsor. You can either put in the form or you can email this one, the grants email. I mean, you're just going to hear back from me, to be honest with you, but you can email the grants email if you have questions about a fiscal sponsor. There are a few orgs who have fiscally sponsored a number of our projects before, so I can shoot some of them your way. Like I saw in the chat, Rabbi Miriam put Beloved as an example, and there are some that we've seen like specifically artists or filmmakers, etc. Um, apply with that I could definitely point your direction as well.
And that is the the end of our questions.
All right. This is your last chance to ask me a question in person. If you're an individual artist too, and you didn't get and you do want to ask ask more, if I can stay on a little bit longer if you do have more you want to ask about the things that are different for individual artists. Otherwise, other than that, this is your last chance to ask questions, and I appreciate you all being here and bearing with me as there a couple errors in there, but getting you as much information as possible, as much information as possible. Um, Great. Cool. Look, we have a few hands. Are these individual artists who are with us now? All right. Great. Great. Perfect. So, okay. First, let me go ahead and let me just find the RFP real quick. It's my friend who's on Survivor right here. Apply for funding live. Great. So, were you all able to check out the part of the RFP and find that, or no? Give me some thumbs, individual art. I got like one thumb. Okay, I got one no thumb. Okay, great. Perfect. First, Jessica, can you post the RFP one more time and then I'm gonna
Yeah, I
figure
sure
out
can.
where the so if you go to page if you go to page 17 in this document, which is like it looks really long, but that's because it has literally everything I just said. Like you all have much less than that. If you go to page 17, you can see the different you can see like the categories that are different and like specifically written to be targeted towards artists and your work. Um, okay, we have hands from Maya and Amalia, so we'll go to Maya first.
Hi, thank you. Um, I have a question about being an individual artist and looking at the criteria and wanting to offer examples of my work for the different examples. Let's say there are some things perhaps in the anti-racist category that are not Jewish, but stuff in the movement building stuff that is Jewish, and then some in another category that is both. Like, does it have to be, do I have to highlight that it's Jewish, I guess, in every single category? Or in the entire application as a whole, you will see as an artist the ways that I do that work? Does that make sense?
I think the second one, the that we should be able to see through the entire application as a whole. You don't have to like constantly remark on how Jewish your work is on every single
Okay.
part of the application.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hmm. Thanks for asking that. All right, Amalia.
Yeah, I'm looking at the application itself now, and under organization information, it's asking for total operating budget. So as an individual artist, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that.
You guys have, shoot me an email. I'm gonna have to like look at what like like we are really not like we're really like whatever like if you're like here's the budget of stuff that like goes towards me being an artist, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
just like whatever that might be. It could just be like it could be your like general living expenses. It could be like we're really not gonna sit here and be like so like down to being
Sure,
like oh my God, like we expect that some of this money might go to living expenses for individual
sure.
artists, right? um so like really don't overthink the budget, especially if you're an
Okay.
individual artist. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Hmm. Alexandra.
Hi. So yeah, I know it's already been talked about at length, but just the seed grant versus the individual artist grant. I feel like my practice is covers a lot of different things, but right now it's specifically about related to Jewish liberation. So it feels more like project based, and that seed funding would be more appropriate. But I don't know. Are you expecting to, will you guys be reading the seed grant applications with openness to artists applying in that category as well? Or is it kind of like an outlier in that category?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think we would definitely be expecting like I think for all the other categories we're expecting like there will be some artist like there are gonna be artists who are just like I need money to like get CDs out. Like I need money to like rent a theater for this thing, right? And so like there's all kinds of different things that we're gonna expect artists to apply for either seed or the CCC grants for. Um it's that we specifically wanted to make sure like just really in particular like when you look at what was happening with our funding as we had more applicants, it started being like, okay, well, we hear from artists that like this kind of grant makes a difference. But then we have like, I mean, 180 applicants last year. We had, I forget how many moved on to the second phase, but it was like too many to really be able to reasonably narrow down. And so then you say, well, how do we, if we're seeing a lot of grants that are like around or even a little bit under $10,000, how do we make sure that we're like actually for this particular type of work? Um, offering grants that are really going to be impactful and make a difference. And so we said, hey, like, sure, there's still going to be some arts projects that are applying in these other categories. Um, but we want to make sure that this is like a protected thing that we are, offering it's a very limited number of them.
Yep.
Um, but making sure that we're like prioritizing that as its own particular track. And, to add to one thing I want to add as well to as we talk about like the budgets and things like that. Like we're going like whatever team that we get that's going to be reviewing this is also going to be like mostly people who are like artists involved in the art world, whatever. So like I know I wouldn't necessarily know what to look at, and that's why I'm not going to be on that team reviewing the proposals. Um, so like really just like like assume that you're writing for people who like have some understanding of what an arts application should look like, especially if you're applying for that individual artist grant, um, rather than just like you're as if you're writing for me. And in the other grant categories, we still try and make sure that our grants team has people that have expertise in a number of different subjects, and like there will be people who like are involved in the arts and like reviewing every application.
Thank you.
Mhm. Amalia, is your hand back up or is it like up? Or is it still up?
I'm sorry, I didn't see the lower hand button.
Okay, no worries.
I,
Okay,
I have
yes,
another little follow-up question, if that's okay. It feels related to the one I asked before.
very okay.
So my fiscal sponsor and like organization, like as an entity, is not only Jewish,
That's
but the
fine.
okay, but the communities that I work with and the art that I bring is Jewish. So I
Totally
don't.
fine.
Okay.
Not even worried about that. Like again, like we're not gonna be like investigating your fiscal sponsor. Like it would be weird if it was Heritage Foundation. It would be weird. I would be surprised. I would be surprised, but yeah, you probably if they would sponsor you, probably be not that likely to get a grant, most likely. But all right, any other questions? Any other questions? Thoughts, comments, concerns, bad jokes? Oh, Deborah, we got a question from Deborah.
Hi, Jordan. I just wanted to say that I'm here on behalf of the network, which I imagine you assumed, but I'm also here. The reason I'm sitting in on the individual artist thing is my son is on his way. He was invited to participate in the New Orleans Poetry Festival that's happening. It starts tonight, so he
Oh
couldn't
wow,
be here. But he's a published poet with 4 collections in print,
wow,
and he's really interested in this. So that's why if you were wondering why I was sitting here still in the individual artist session, that's why.
very
Thank
cool. That's great to hear. Thanks for letting me know, Deborah. Okay. Well,
Love to see parents supporting their children's artistic practice. I just wanted to quickly chime in and say, it's such a shame that I didn't get to do this with the larger group, but just so much appreciation for you, Jordan, for holding this process with so much rigor and like the comprehensiveness of this is so clear, and the years and years of refinement and sharpening and like just focus on keeping us clear and strategic is no small feat. Thank you so much for your work.
absolutely. I appreciate that. I appreciate. Now, I was about to stop the recording during that.
No, we're
This,
keeping
I
that in.
intentionally left it going.
I'm telling
I'm going to stop
Noah,
it now,
Everyone
though.
we're
has to
putting this
listen
on the
to
website.
praising you.
Uh, but I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. Appreciate all you applicants. Appreciate you shouting me out, Karen. And yeah, I really do. It has been made with care, so I really hope that this process feels I hope it feels as good for you as we hope it does. We are certainly trying our best, not without hiccups, just like the slideshow. But really appreciate you all and looking forward to welcoming your applications. Okay, one more question. We got one more question. See, we couldn't have stopped the recording. We couldn't have stopped it.
I'm sorry. You said that this was being recorded partly so it would be available later. When-ish will it be available? Like if
Is
my
today Thursday? Oof,
next week?
yeah. I did ask Noah to do it right now, but probably Monday. Probably Monday. Most likely Monday. It'll go out in an email, and that email, if you were at this call, it'll be an email to you. It'll also go on our website too.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow,
Thank
look
you.
at that. You guys met. That's crazy. All right. Appreciate.
Thank you and bye.
Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.